I'm in the restroom of a big global ministry called ICP, International Centre for Prayer Global. This is a very strange place to deliver a message in a restroom, but I feel led to give a word of encouragement to people out there who might be going through treacherous times at the moment. I just want to give you a message from my heart. Now, a restroom is a very strange place to actually choose to give a message of hope, but a restroom does give you a lot of information about the kind of church that you go to. Ironically, we did study about the kind of churches this Sunday service in our Bible study. We did do a study on 1 Corinthians 12:13 through to 20, and we studied what the qualities were that you should look for in a church, which was a very interesting study. But the reason a restroom does give you a lot of information about a church is because, have you noticed, if you're from the UK, that whenever you go into Witherspoons, like they've got these huge, amazing restrooms, you know, and the meals aren't necessarily the most extravagant, but they have a huge array of affordable choices for everybody to choose something they like. And then you go into the restaurant and there's this huge restroom and you just feel like you're really at home, you know? So, like this one, I mean, you know, it's an amazingly spacious restroom, and it does give a lot of details about the kind of believers that are, you know, studying the Word of God, because, you know, it's airy and it gives you space to just think what you've learned and incorporate into your own life, and it just gives you a feeling of freedom, you know, freedom. Whereas if you go to one with a sort of pokey, you know, like place where you can barely move and you don't really know how you're gonna like fit into that cubicle, and you're struggling to like, you know, walk through it, and it's just the bare essentials, then that probably is what you're going to get, you know. In the body itself, you'll probably just get the bare essentials. But if you want a church that's going to try and expand on its understanding and look more closely about what God wants to speak to you, and you want a more kind of intimate relationship with the Lord, like prophetic edge, then, you know, you need to look at these kind of characteristics that give themselves away. Now, back to the message itself, and you can't always judge a church by its restroom. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, like, if you're looking for a place to really discover the details of what God is saying to you in your relationship with Him, then you also, as well as following the leadership, you also need a place to be able to figure things out in your own relationship with God, in spirit and in truth. And, you know, you'll find that if it's clean and tidy, it also gives a lot of information about the body itself and the way they follow God, you know. But because it's probably the way that they order their lives, you know. But what I want to say to you is, I've been through a really lot the last few years. I've been let down by everybody. And the message I want to give you today is to never lose hope, you know. Whatever situation that you're in, never lose hope. And this is easy to just say the words, but like, I've been misdiagnosed with 2 chronic illnesses, and it wasn't even that the doctors didn't know that I had them, because they offered me 2 operations to remove the debris from them, in the side of my head. In other words, they started off by insinuating it was all in my head, but then they went on to admit that I'd been suffering from something all along, and it was clearly in the scans, and I needed to have it removed. And you would think that that would be the end of the whole scenario, but it wasn't. Because instead of being rescued by these surgeons, when they took it out, they did not accurately diagnose the infection. They just left me with the word infection, but they didn't actually describe what it was. So unfortunately, after they took it out, it grew back again, and even to this day, I'm having diagnostic issues with the doctors. But if that wasn't bad enough, I had another illness that was attacking my immune system, and I was battling that on my own, and they still never gave me the information for that either. So I pretty much had to buy my whole treatment myself, even though they operated on me, took out the infection, and diagnosed me with infection. Unfortunately, a few years later, it grew back even worse, and my whole life was shut down with physical pain. And then I was unable to continue my job, and I was kind of really forced to leave it. But the worst thing was, that wasn't even a paid job. It was kind of like a voluntary position that was meant to lead to an apprentice. But you put the grafting in with the intention that you're going to move up the ladder, because it was my dream opportunity. But I never got it, because the illness just shut me down like that, whack down, And so all that reading in the middle of the night to graduate, as like, apart from my working life before it, came to zip, And then on top of all of that, I've had a really lousy doctor that, refused to help me in this diagnostic jigsaw puzzle. And on top of, actually just helping me get somewhere with it. Sometimes you have an amazing doctor who really wants to help you go forward and figure out what's really going on. And sometimes people are blessed to have GPs like that. But unfortunately, I wasn't. And not only that, there wasn't a second brand in the town. So on top of that, to be really quite honest, they've been making the infection worse than it already was. So what I'm trying to say is, it's a miracle I'm not dead. It really is. And if I hadn't pursued my journey of faith with intention, I'm sure I would have been dead by now. In fact, every day I wake up, I am thanking God that I'm not actually deceased, because to actually beat Hodgkin's lymphoma and a parasitic brain illness together on my own, and have to do the research myself, and have to decide what I needed to buy, and then also pursue NHS doctors, re-referrals, which I'm still doing to this day. And then on top of that, it's taken the teaching board a year to try and allocate me a choice of a second brand of doctor, GP practice, because within a 50-mile radius, they won't offer you a second brand. And the doctors who even had access to taking bloods and stool samples never really helped me get anywhere with it. And you would think that having illnesses that seriously would have created a reaction in them that would have caused them to just help you get to the bottom of it. Even if they didn't know the answer, they might have told you who to go to privately to get a decent diagnostic situation, or a proper immune biopsy, or the proper bloods done to go forward and figure out how you could beat these illnesses. But instead, he seemed to be just obsessed about putting me on an involuntary vaccination program, because there seemed to be something that was on top of the treatments I was buying, kind of antagonizing it, bringing it back to life over and over again. So there was, in the background, seemed to be some kind of involuntary, I seem to be nominated for something that I never consented to. I'm not quite sure how they legally managed that, but they did. They managed to nominate me, even though I've got no mental health history at all. I'm not on any treatments. I'm not on any, psychiatric medication. I'm not under any kind of thing like that. I've never been anxious, and I really should have had a nervous breakdown through all of this, but I've always stayed calm through the pain and the suffering. I've always stayed smiling. I've always stayed polite. I've never hurt anybody. I've never hurt myself. I've never caused any damage to property. And I've always just kept my cool. I've just tried to push forward about how to get rid of it on my own. And you can imagine I've spent a lot on trying different things. I'm still doing that right now. And when I finally beat this, I'm talking as a woman of faith who should be dead. When I finally beat this, I'll probably write a book about what I use to help other people. But I was definitely nominated for something that I never consented to. And instead of making my illnesses better, they made them worse. And then they blamed everyone else but themselves. And then they frauded my records, even though I have no history whatsoever. So, there's some pretty horrendous abuses that have taken place. And if I hadn't known how to follow Christ, I would have actually lost my mind. So, the real testimony in all of this, I never lost my mind. And the reason I never lost my mind was due to a really good pastor in Hawaii who preached the word with his heart. And thanks to his good ministry, I didn't fall apart, because sometimes when you're going through choppy seas, you might lose hope, you might start to wish you were dead, wish God would take your life because the pain is just too much. But I never wished that for myself. I never wished I was dead. Because of his ministry, because he taught the word with his heart, because he taught the Old Testament, he gave me a hunger for it that I never had before, and he built on my faith journey. And because of the fact he preached the word that the rapture is soon, and I believe he's right, because he preached that word with his heart, and no one else was preaching it, no one else had the, I don't want to say the word, courage to do it, to do it that way. I didn't lose hope, because I thought, what is the point of being suicidal if God's going to come get you, and bring you to his kingdom? So, because of his testimony, I was never suicidal, and I was going through hell, both physically and, I kept my cool. And even through the most painful moments, I just pushed through and decided what I was going to do next. But it still remains that every time I go home, for some reason, I get worse, and there's no explanation for it. I don't know why. Every time I go home to my house, I get worse. So all the treatments that have been making me better, they've been making me better now. You can see that in my physical appearance. And I do these videos to show people that when the treatments have made me better, so it's on record. But whenever I go home, I suddenly get worse, and I'm sure it's something to do with that GP practice. I can't put my finger right on it, but I feel like they've deliberately made me worse. and then to avoid the legal action in court, they've probably been they've actually frauded the records as well. They put a load of rubbish on it that doesn't exist, and it's mind blowing, like what they've tried to do to just try to freak me out. But with my relationship with God, I used to live to go to faith camp. My journey was going to faith camp every year, and I knew that if I had that to look forward to, I could handle anything, because I knew that God was going to make it better if I just, like the one with blood, if I just touched the hem of his garment, if I just got to faith camp, I knew everything was going to be okay. And when I got there, another kind of 10,000 people, I don't know if it was as many as 10,000, it probably was slightly less. They used to have pretty big figures there, like 5,000, just started in the cow shed, you know. And then everyone who got there, like half of them, you discover they were going through different journeys, but they all felt the same way. If they could just get to faith camp, everything was going to be okay. And every year we had this aspiration, whether we had to crawl on our knees to get to faith camp, we were going to get there, and we did, you know. And I remember in 2018, when they shut it down, I remember sobbing, because even though I respected the leadership saying, God is doing a new thing now, and I believed them that he was, I still sobbed with disappointment that it was over, that such